Hello, my name's Philippa Waller.
My name is Penelope Waller, and we are two of the directors at 4D Human Being.
And welcome to the 4D Human Being podcast. What's it all about, Pen?
It's all about your personal and professional relationships. It's about your communication skills, how you lead, how you work and build teams, how you are looking after yourself and your well-being, and how you are much more at choice. What do we mean by that?
Well, sometimes we can get a little caught in patterns in life and we can all be a little bit on our automatic pilot. So 4D Human Being is all about helping us get back to choice and being a four-dimensional human being. And your fourth dimension, of course,
is intention. So whether it's about your impact, your leadership style, your team dynamics, whether it's about your well-being, whether it's about your communication or your presentation skills, anything that involves human beings interacting with other human beings, 4D Human Being are here to help.
We're going to take a deep dive and look at some tools, insights, theories that are going to help you go from a 3D human doing to a 4D human being so that you can happen to the world rather than the world simply happening to you. Hello.
Hello, we're hot, aren't we?
Well, I can interpret that in many ways, but sadly, I know you mean temperature. But otherwise,
Listen,
that would have shown a great deal of confidence.
And I go back to the alternative interpretation of that comment. We are trending on TikTok.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean,
in my definition of trending.
How many views is trending? More than one?
Yeah.
Okay. Definitely trending then. It's gone crazy. Double figures now. It's more than that. It's very exciting. Maybe we found our platform. Who knew the TikTok twins? That's what it's going to be.
I don't think I'm going to tell my daughters that I'm a TikTok star.
Well,
firstly, because it's not true.
And secondly, because they just go, oh, Mum, you're such a loser.
They will.
Yeah.
They will.
Yeah.
And I think TikTok will suddenly become the uncoolest thing on the planet. So yeah. I think I'll keep that quiet.
Do check us out on TikTok and realise how untrending we really are. But
it's fun though, isn't it?
It is fun. It's fun. It's hot and it's evening. I mean, it's nearly 9 o'clock in the UK.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And we're in my sauna.
And we're in your sauna. It's not actually a sauna.
It's an office. It's an office that
could double up. If you don't put the aircon on.
It could today double up.
But it's quite nice doing a sort of evening.
I know, we don't usually do it.
It's Friday night. Other people are out. You and I are having a chat in your office. So there we go. That's our life.
I honestly can't think of a better way to spend my Friday night. And that is actually true.
Well, ditto. Right back at you. So,
especially given what we're going to talk about today, which are two of my hot favourite topics.
I know. And I'm looking at the watch that I don't have on my wrist. And I'm just thinking, these are so your hot topics. And
hot is the adjective.
Hot is the word of the evening, of the day. And I think I'm just aware that I'm wondering how long we're going to be able to last in here.
Well, so, I would say I'm going to keep an eye on the video, and when my T-shirt is completely drenched in sweat, we'll call it a day.
That will not trend on TikTok. Nobody needs that. No.
So we are on episode 2
of the Silent Retreat.
Of the Silent Retreat campaign.
5 leadership and relationship lessons from a silent retreat.
I loved our first episode. I think it's one of my favourite episodes that we've done recently. Yeah, because I think more experiences in 2024 and 25 that we can correlate, if you like, to leadership and life. And Matt often talks about this, doesn't he, in terms of his theatre direction. There's so many things we can learn, perhaps from doing things that we don't think are automatically associated with work and leadership and relationships.
Definitely.
Yeah,
I mean, whitewater rafting springs to mind.
Yeah,
watch this space.
Yeah.
So, lessons 2 and 3.
Yes.
So let's quickly go through them again. So we had 5 leadership and relationship lessons from a silent retreat.
Now, you've written arse there, which I'm assuming isn't lesson 2.
Yes, or ass it could be, couldn't it? Sort of donkey. Yes, it is lesson 2, but it's an abbreviation. No one needs that lesson. So first lesson was, we talked about that in the previous podcast, which was all about impact. Number 2, assumptions. Number 3, ego. Number 4, intention. Number 5, story. So today we are going to talk about assumptions and ego. I'm actually watching your eyes widen because you love bringing in. We've got the models that we use for this are the 4D assumptions ladder and the healthy ego grid, which is one of our
top favourite
tools.
Yeah.
So this is right into the core.
Do you know why I love them so much? Because they are internal mechanisms, if you like, in terms of the human being and our responses and our behaviours. And I think they are easy to grasp and easy to understand from these two models.
Such a big change.
Such a big change. Yeah. And the assumptions...
Oh, incoming.
Oh, I have kept my phone on because my daughter is she's 16 and she's flying on her... Not on her, actually, with some friends. Do
you need to listen to that?
I do need to listen to that.
Yeah.
We might cut this out of the podcast, but I will just quickly listen to that. Although depending what she says, we could leave it in.
Hello, Mummy. We're about to go on the plane. I'm going to put airplane mode. I'll text you later as soon as we land.
Okay, Roger.
It's all happening.
It's all go.
She's on the plane!
She's on the plane. Well, again, this is the day where we've had the global IT outage. So to be fair, this morning we weren't sure we'd have a message this evening.
No,
on the plane.
So very, very happy about
nice
it. But yes, so going back to they are easy models to... I think, to understand and to grasp, have such a huge impact in terms of your understanding about the inner operations of a human being.
What's actually affecting your relationship.
What's actually happening. Yeah. And there's really, really good reasons why both assumptions and ego exist and behave in the way that they do. And I think until I don't usually use the word but I think it's a good one here. But until we understand them, I think we can be quite... confused.
Wow, I think they are both the water in our goldfish bowl, aren't they?
They are. That's a really good way to phrase it. Yeah.
For a lot of us, these two phenomena are happening all the time, and we can't see it because it's just the water in the goldfish bowl.
Exactly.
We're just looking through these things
to the other
people, and wondering why they are so annoying or so difficult or whatever it is.
Which now that you say that and you use that analogy, which is perfect, I can understand why perhaps they were two of your 5 things on your silent retreat.
Well, So on the silent retreat, of course, these were 2 of the things. If I go backwards, the ego was a big thing because it was embedded into the learning. Like, really, if I was going to say, what were we learning to do when we were doing Vipassana meditation? And really what you're learning to do is to calm and quieten.
And is that quite explicit in the teaching?
It's quite explicit. So it's right in there. So it's not only also what came up for me, which is, your own personal reflection or around other people, but it's such a big part of Buddhism and Vipassana meditation. So ego was right in there, and really made me realise how integrated 4D is with Eastern and Western philosophy. Like, it's just the beautiful marriage of those two. And then assumptions, of course. I can't think of many other environments other than a silent retreat. I'm sure there's lots, isn't there? But a silent retreat is such a distillation of how we make assumptions because you're in this sort of false environment, if you like, where you've got that lack of verbal communication.
Yes.
And so you are absolute. I want to say you're forced into making assumptions, and part of me wants to say that's not true, of course, because you don't have to make assumptions, but you do.
Yeah.
So you are left with I think what's interesting about it is when the space opens up, like on a silent retreat, and I think this is what happens to us when we are, let's say you're in a team or you've gone on holiday with some friends or family, and in your tribe, you have maybe more connection, more understanding, more empathy.
Yeah.
But the other team over there that you have less communication with, or you can just see across the office.
Yeah.
Or the person who's put their bag too far over your desk, but you have less communication with. Or if you're on holiday and there are other people who are taking the loungers by the pool. Those people that we don't have that level of understanding, communication, intimacy with, that's where the gap opens up, and that's where we start making all the assumptions.
Well, and possibly the unhelpful assumptions.
Definitely.
Like, I can imagine if I was on the silent retreat with you, and as I said on the last episode, it's not very likely, but let's imagine for a moment that I was, and you saw me behaving in a certain way, you would probably make quite accurate assumptions to start with, and also probably quite positive assumptions in terms of
what you
thought was going on with me. And somebody else could behave in exactly the same way.
I've got the story. Have I got the story? So I had this. Do you know the story I'm going to tell?
But I love the fact that you've always got a story.
I've got the perfect example of that, and it was such a clanger. Like it was a moment of, oh yeah, this is what happens. And again, it's because it was a silent retreat, because we lacked that verbal communication. Otherwise, I'd have probably talked to this person and
unpacked it a little bit.
Yeah, or even before I would have known her a bit more, and we would have laughed about it. But of course, we didn't. What was so brilliant, this is, I think for me, this absolutely sums up what happens with assumptions, that we're far more generous to ourselves, not always, but can be, or to people that we know, because we know the facts.
And this is part of the reason why that mechanism of assumptions exists in our brain, and we'll talk about this, because back in the day in our tribes, we had to very quickly make assumptions about people outside of our tribe, because it could be do or die. I mean, you don't know.
Exactly. So it's
sort of there for a reason. And survival.
Absolutely. And historically, and still very useful. I mean, good to make an assumption on a dark night.
Sure.
If someone's, sort of following you and edging towards you, maybe make the assumption that this might not be, it's useful.
But let's see if that tallies with your example on the side.
So I think it was about night 3, and I could hear the person in the next door room to me so in the morning, so we're woken up at
crazy,
like
early.
I think it was 4?
Yeah.
It's 4 in the morning. I mean, I've even put that out of my memory. 4 in the morning. So I mean, not even morning, middle of the night. Anyway, so the gong goes. Yes, it's a gong. So the gong goes, and the door next to me opens, and I can hear someone shuffle in slippers, no shoes inside, up the corridor to the bathroom. Fine.
One word.
And then the next thing,
beep, 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 beep.
The alarm goes off in the room next door to me,
where there is now nobody.
I know there's nobody in. So now, to be fair,
were you still in bed?
I was still in bed. To be fair, I was getting up as well, but it's an annoying noise, right? So of course, I'm immediately like, thoughtless, just didn't think. Just thought, I'm getting in that shower. My least generous self coming up. So that was my thinking.
But couldn't say anything.
I couldn't go into the room, because how do I explain it? I can't. So you just have to, and then I'm dealing with my ego. You have to, because you've got to manage it. Because one of the big teachings is, of course, life, it doesn't go your way all the time. Well, how are you sitting with it? But well, isn't
it possible that you could end up full of hatred and rage?
But that's what you're. But actually, when we did talk at the end, because somebody who'd been there before, she said to me that last time she came, she said I was like boiling over for the whole year. But of course, that's what you're then faced with and you're dealing with. So
anyway, alarm.
So alarm goes off, right? And I'm like, how thoughtful. Like, to not think, I'm just going to, before I leave my room, because I know I've set my alarm. Yeah. Literally the next night, I hear the gong. I do have a clock in my room, but I hear the gong, because the gong goes for everybody. Someone's got up earlier than 4 and has gone round with the gong. And I get up and I think, right, good, I'm up. And I go to the bathroom,
and it's an alarm clock that everyone has, because you're not allowed a phone, obviously.
No, it's an alarm clock. You cannot have digital. You can't be in contact with anybody. Go to the bathroom, brush my teeth, get myself ready.
Lovely.
I mean, get my hair product on, because there are some things you don't drop even on a silent retreat. Let's be clear. So then I get myself back home, and my alarm clock. And I think to myself, that bit forgetful. Just a bit forgetful. Oh well. I'm sure nobody minds. It's like volcano, like exploding head. But of course I caught myself thinking,
it's different when you do it.
Yeah, it's different. Exactly. I caught myself going, oh, oops. And then I immediately thought, that's interesting. Because my alarm's different.
Yeah. Because I didn't mean to leave.
Because I'm not thoughtless or selfish.
Well, it goes back to, of course, we judge ourselves on intention, and we judge other people on their behaviour. There it is, right there.
So it was just brilliant, and I'm sure other people had wonderful moments like that, where they similarly had experiences where they made a judgment about somebody but then did a very similar thing. Or, you know, like, for example, I don't know, you know, so for example, you know, getting the pudding before you've eaten the main meal, and then something really nice comes up and you realise by day 4 that there's not always enough left, you know. So, you know, you're just, the rules are shifting now, aren't they? You know, so
I can't speak to anybody.
Yeah, but you know,
work it out.
I didn't like that they got their pudding before the main meal, but now I know that there's never enough cake.
Well, the thing that I find really interesting about those stories,
the shifting goalposts.
Well, the shifting goalposts, but also, I suppose you could stop the thought process at, oops, my alarm went off. The fact that you then went on to think, that was the same as yesterday. Yeah. I wonder if everybody does that. I mean, I suppose that is part of the purpose of the silent retreat.
I think it's quite. I mean, I think,
is it hard not to do that?
I think it would be hard to do that for 10 solid days when you're really only sleeping for about 5 of them a day. I mean, you're up for 18, 19 hours a day.
So to not recognise.
Well, I think you would boil over and leave.
Yeah.
And there are a few people that left.
Yeah.
People do leave. And I'm not saying that's the only reason that they leave, but I just don't know how you'd end up sitting with yourself, because you'd be raging
at everybody else. So you have to sort of turn the mirror on the self.
Yeah, you have. And you have to sort of, you know, regulate and manage yourself, because how can you sit on a meditation mat from 4 a.m. until 9 p.m?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're just boiling over with rage at the world.
You couldn't.
And you'd have to, and also because of some of the lessons, every night there's a video and some of the lessons. Like, again, I don't know that you could hear. You're either going to hear those lessons and go, he's an idiot. That guru.
That's not me. I don't. That's nothing to do with me.
He's an idiot too. I'm leaving this place. This is all rubbish. Or you're hearing it going, hold on a minute. So I think it becomes a bit binary.
Yeah.
You know?
And the other thing I love about the assumptions that you've spoken to me about is, of course, I guess ideally the main part of the work is to self-reflect and, you know, understand how your mind is working, all those things. But of course, you have got all that time. There's no speaking, there's no books, there's no media, there's nothing. So of course, the brain would be very tempted to create some narratives about the people around you that you don't know and have just met.
Well, and that's why
because it's sort of, where else is the brain going to go?
And that's why these two sit together so beautifully, assumptions and ego, because I think we mentioned briefly in the last podcast, that ego, I mean, it is such a sneaky sod. I think that's what really made me smile a few times. I know that we know, you know, we know when we've got an internal narrative, or we can catch.
Yeah.
You know, if you've done some self-development, you can usually catch a thought. But the disguises that the ego comes in blew me away. I wonder if we just quickly say, what do we mean by assumptions and why do we need to be careful about them? So assumptions are the immediate, maybe that's been really clear, but the immediate judgments that we're not even conscious really of constructing based on things that have happened to us in the past, the way we've been brought up, partly genetics maybe, but
limited data.
So for example, you know, I don't know, somebody walks in with their shoulders back, head held high, wearing red. You've had whatever experiences in your past, and you'll immediately make an assumption around they're aggressive or they're powerful or they're whatever it might be. But we'll have this, we're drawing from past data to build a picture of what we see in the present. And like some, limited.
Yeah, and some assumptions are incredibly useful because the brain simply cannot process the amount of data that we are exposed to. It just cannot. So it has to make assumptions quite quickly. So very, very useful, particularly if we get a sense we're in danger, we'll make some quick assumptions about what's around us. So can be super, super useful, there for a very, very good reason.
Yes.
And
but when they're less helpful, they become very limiting. Yeah, because we are limiting our understanding of a situation, and we're also limiting the potential and possibility of what the other person who the other person is, who they could become, what they might be able to do. We're limiting future relationships, opportunities, because we've already decided.
Because we can get locked into beliefs, and then that's our narrow view of the world, and nothing else is true or possible. We can also get locked into assumptions and create falsehoods, really, for ourselves that aren't true at all.
And miserable ones.
We can also get locked into negative assumptions. We have a strong negative bias, so we can assume the worst. And, of course, we can make assumptions because of bias. So an example of this might be if you ask it's probably getting slightly different now, I would imagine, but back in the day, if you asked a group of primary school kids to draw an airline pilot or an astronaut, they would always draw a man. And that's just an assumption based on what you've understood in life is more likely. So there's lots of reasons that assumptions there, and lots of impacts of making assumptions, good at useful and not so useful.
I think one of the most sort of grabbable applications for this are the assumptions that we make that cause us suffering. So the assumptions that we make that somebody doesn't like me, or my boss didn't think I did a good job there, or I'm not good enough. Exactly. And so often we're drawing on, exactly as you said earlier, we're drawing on a behaviour or an appearance that has absolutely no foundation in a judgment or opinion. So, classic one is somebody was distracted during your presentation, or somebody checked a message on their mobile phone, and your assumption may well immediately go to, I wasn't very good, or they're not very interested in me, rather than, they probably remember it's my birthday and the whole group are ordering a birthday cake surprise for me. Which is less likely. Or they just need to check that because they so wanted to stay in this session, they're just making sure that their team's got exactly what they need so that they can stay here, because it's so important for them to be here and listen to my presentation. There's so many narratives, and it's classic on the road as well. Oh my goodness, why did that person cut me up? They're an idiot. Oh, they might be driving their partner to the hospital.
Exactly.
So we're doing it all the time, and it causes us a lot of pain.
So the model that we use that might be useful to think about is a ladder. And if you think about the bottom of the ladder is all of the possible data you could gather. So let's imagine on the silent retreat, all of the data that you can gather could be anything from the environment that you're in, what you're seeing around you, the different people, the way they look, how they're dressed, how they're moving, what they do, anything at all. Masses of data, masses of people, lots of different things are happening in every single second. That's your pool of data. And your brain, like I said before, it can't possibly process every single bit of data in real time. So it just selects some pieces of data that it thinks are most relevant. And then it will draw assumptions and conclusions based on that data, which will then feed into the beliefs about a situation, and then you will then behave and respond based on what
your actions and your choices.
Exactly, based on what you have assumed and believed from that situation.
And then your actions will create a reaction.
Well, that's the thing.
And then
this is the tricky thing about the assumption ladder, is there's two little tricky loops in it. Mm-hmm. So one of them is, right at the bottom, when you think about the data that you select, it won't come as a huge surprise to you that you are not being completely neutral about the pieces of data that you select. Of all the data that's available, like you just said about the mobile phone.
Oh, so yes, exactly. So you've got 20 people in the room and one person checks their mobile phone.
Exactly. Your brain is going to go to the piece of data.
Not the 20 people nodding.
Not the 20 people nodding and having a great time. Yeah. It's going to go to that one piece of data. So your brain will select data based on pre-existing beliefs and self-beliefs and pre-existing experience. So you're already biased and narrowing down the pieces of data that you're going to select. So that's your first tricky loop. Yeah. And then the second tricky loop is, once you've gone through that process of making assumptions, drawing conclusions, and then you behave in a certain way because of your assumption about somebody else, your actions will then influence how that other person sees you and then responds. Yeah. And therefore they will behave in a certain way, and that will then be fed into that pool of data that you start collecting.
So your little huff and irritation with the person
will change the pool of data available to you.
It's going to make them feel like, are they irritated with me?
Yes.
Hang on a minute, I'm just checking a hospital appointment.
Exactly. So our own beliefs and our own actions are self-perpetuating the data that we will see and collect in front of us, and therefore the assumptions that we'll make. It's amazing when you realise it.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, it's not that assumptions are bad. It's just that some of these little loops that we get caught in can be very unhelpful.
Yeah. A quick word from us at 4D Human Being. If you're enjoying the show, please do click follow so that you can have the 4D Human Being podcast instantly in your feed. And we'd love it if you liked and reviewed us. Let us know what you think.
Please do think of one or two people that you could share the 4D Human Being podcast with. Somebody who would really benefit from the content you're listening to right now.
Back to the show. And of course, this is where the sort of humorous laughing at yourself about the alarm clock is the moment where you've come up for air, you've got your head above the water, because all the time that you're in it, that lovely loop along with your
feels
ego,
real.
that partnership of assumptions and ego are absolutely justifying why you should feel
this is real, this is true.
And I have it a lot with clients when we start getting to a place where the belief is surfacing, that the last place of resistance, other than it's other people's faults, but actually the last place of resistance is, yes, but it feels like a truth.
Yeah.
It feels true.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like an option. It feels like a truth.
Yeah.
And that it's quite hard to let that go.
Yeah.
Because
it feels so real.
It feels so real. And that's what's so tricky about assumptions and ego is it plants us so firmly in the ground and says, yeah, this is the gospel of reality. And to sort of go, no, it's not.
No, it's not.
It's what I think based on what I see.
Yes. And I see based on what I do.
What I already thought before.
Exactly.
You know, it's like the Matrix loop, isn't it?
It is. So
freedom lies with breaking out of this loopy ladder.
Yeah. And
that's the dog, by the way, not a lion growling.
And we do integrate the assumptions work into some of our programs. Not as many of them as I would like. It tends to be more when we're doing leadership development programs that will talk about assumptions or team dynamics. It's such a brilliant piece.
Yeah.
And I mean, going on a silent retreat must be almost one of the ultimate ways to really experience.
To really surface them.
Yeah.
So a really good question to ask is, what else could this mean? So when you feel irritated or annoyed with somebody, when we get out of good relationship or we start sort of othering, is ask yourself, what else could this mean? Another really good thing to ask is, if this was somebody that I really, really cared about, what would my response be? Because it would be different. Or if it was yourself.
Yeah.
And a really good game to play is opposite opinion.
Yes.
So if you've got that difficult colleague, or you've just come across a selfish driver.
Yeah, they're this, they're that.
Or even if it's just, it's something more situational. So this disastrous curveball or change that's come into your life. Notice the negative assumption that you've made. So this is going to be disastrous. It's all going to go wrong.
Yeah.
I'm never going to work again.
Yeah.
Or the difficult colleague. I can't work with them. They're so difficult.
They're so selfish. They don't care.
And they're stupid. Or
they never deliver on time, or whatever it might be.
Or the selfish driver. They're a bad driver. They're an idiot. They'll whatever it is. They're thoughtless. They're whatever, causing problems for everybody. Whatever it is, notice it, and now play with making the complete opposite opinion.
Yeah.
So, for example, the selfish driver. What if that was the most generous and kind driver?
Yeah.
What could be happening over there?
It's almost like trying to mine observations or possibilities from that massive data pool that are the opposite to the ones that you've taken. Even though you think that the ones you've taken are true, you've got to go back into that pool of data and find the opposite ones.
Exactly. And the difficult colleague. So, maybe they're passionate about what they're talking
or they
about.
actually came in early on Tuesday, or actually they made a coffee for me last Friday.
Yes, exactly.
Or anything at all.
And what's interesting about it is, whether or not you believe it initially, which you probably won't, but what's interesting about it is how easy it is to create hundreds of different narratives.
Yeah.
It's just that we're stuck in our automatic one. So those are a couple of really nice games to play.
Which I guess you did after the second alarm clock incident.
Oh, I think that was the laughter. I was like, because immediately, And, it's another good exercise, isn't it? It's the mirror on self.
Yeah.
When we think, when we think someone's a really awful driver, is just go, let me just think about the last time I didn't quite do something in the best way.
Yeah.
But exactly in that moment with the alarm clock, it just made me smile, because I was just like, I'm that.
Yeah.
I'm that person.
Yeah.
And, and it's just a mistake. It's just a human error. It's just, that's all it is. So this quote from the actor Alan Alda I love. Your assumptions are your windows on the world. Scrub them off every once in a while, or the light won't come in.
Oh, I love that.
Isn't that nice?
Love Alan Alda.
Yeah, I love Alan Alda. So that's assumptions. So let's marry that with the ego, and we talk about the healthy ego. So in sort of Vipassana meditation, Buddhism, often we'll talk about sort of getting rid of the ego. The way we think about it is your ego is your sense of self. Yeah. What you want is that ego to be a really healthy place to come from.
Yeah, a nice solid sense of self, so that the ego doesn't feel like it's got to go into some defensive battle with the world.
Well, this is it. In fact, I'm going to skip straight to the quote that almost reversed from how we did the last one. And I think this quote really sums that up. This is an Eckhart Tolle quote. All you need to know and observe in yourself is this. Whenever you feel superior or inferior to anyone, that's the ego in you. And I think, it's what you talk to is, if you feel deflated and crushed and dreadful and, like I'm not worth anything.
That's also the ego.
That's also the ego. And if you feel like no one else can do anything like as well as I can, everyone else are idiot. I mean, I'm doing the extremes. They're wrong, I'm right. That's also the ego. So it's just a good sense check that for us, the healthy ego is right in that balance where you're like, well, I've got myself and I know what I think. And
what's everyone else got?
I'm open to you.
Yeah.
Like, we're all on the playing field, on a level playing field.
Totally.
Here. And it's a really nice sense check when we feel that we're sort of, our nose is a little bit up in the air and we're sort of looking down on people. Very good sense check.
Yeah. And it's part of it is about kind of not taking things personally. So if something happens out there in the world, if it's a bad drive or if it's a piece of feedback or someone criticises you or whatever it might be, it's being in a state where the ego is still okay and it's really interested in this new piece of information that's come up, but it's not
destroyed.
It's like, God, that's some really kind of strong feedback I've had there. I'm quite curious to learn what they've noticed and why they might feel like that. So it's being whole and open at the same time, and it's not easy. Because of how the ego is built up over time since we were a child and why the ego is there, it's not easy. But boy, it's a wonderful, wonderful place to be.
Well, I think this is the thing, I think of all the work... I know. I feel bad. I mean, that is... I'm just going to say that a fly has now landed in my glass of water.
It's swimming around really fast. I was trying to get it out.
And
I did the opposite.
And I do want to say that as we talk about the silent retreat, as you go
You're not allowed to kill an animal.
You're not allowed to kill an animal. It's absolutely...
I think he's all right.
So, I think he's not now.
Sorry, Fly.
Sorry, Fly. But
it wasn't intentional.
It wasn't intentional. He did... Oh, no, he's still going. All right, let's get him out. As you
don't use my... Oh, okay, use that.
No,
okay.
As you go into...
A fly must be able to survive a little swim.
Well, he's not getting out, is he? I've got him out. I've saved him.
You are literally I don't know.
Yeah, well...
Buddhist.
Well, that's not true, is it? Because I eat meat, so it's not true. But as you didn't eat meat at the silent retreat, by the way. As you go into the residential blocks... This is one of the first... I talk about assumptions. This is one of the first things you see is a little plastic clear cup, like a water cup, and a piece of card. And it said something like fly rescue or fly catcher. And I looked at that and went, that doesn't bode well. Like...
Are there going to be a lot of flies?
There's going to be a lot of flies. Yeah. You walk into a hotel and you get sort of little...
You don't want a fly catcher.
No, exactly. You get chocolates on your pillow and a nice...
Not a fly catcher.
Soap and so you're not a fly catcher. And I was like, this does not bode well. But of course, that's exactly...
You didn't turn around and say, well, I think I'm in the wrong block.
I'm sorry. What? I'm sorry. I seem to have a... What?
I did have a fly catch instead of chocolates on my pillow.
Why don't I need a fly catch? But it was exactly that, to not kill the fly. But we've saved, we've almost embodied the silent retreat here, and we've saved the fly.
And he's just drying off.
He's drying off. He's drying off.
I probably wouldn't drink that water then.
No, I won't. So, anyway, let's talk through. Well, let's first of all, the ego. How do we know when it gets triggered? It gets triggered when we start feeling dissatisfied, doubting, angry, anxious, not good enough. Yeah. So all of these feelings are the ego having been pushed in some way. Now, as somebody very dear to me says very often, sainthood is hard. So, this is work in progress for all of us, because it's not easy, is it?
I don't know if even saints are saints.
Well, exactly, that's what I mean.
Who's got the perfect ego?
I think the Dalai Lama has his moments, doesn't he? So, so in Vipassana meditation, they talk about, in the teachings, craving and aversion, and actually it's a really good way to think about the ego, because either way, I don't want it like that or I want it like that, but either way it's not okay how it is. And that really sums up, I think, the unhealthy ego is whatever's happening, whether it's something about myself, another person, or a situation. Either I don't want it like that or I want it like that. And you can equally think about it in terms of the donut.
Yes.
I want the donut, I don't want the apple. Like the craving and aversion that is all about something's not good enough, or something, or I want more of something.
Yeah.
And of course, the thing about the ego is, there we are, a little bit like the assumptions, off the back of assumptions, in comes. You think about assumptions kind of coming in like the advance guard, and right behind, just to really finish you off, the ego comes in to really,
it's exhausting.
And the reason I say that is because, of course, it's like we feel like we're sort of tooled up with these things. That person over there, or this change initiative at work, and those people, and blah, blah, blah. Or we're attacking ourselves. But either way, the suffering is in us.
Yes.
And so
I know. Yes.
This is the thing about the limiting or negative assumptions.
It doesn't feel like that, though.
No, but you're so caught up in your justification that person, and you're raging, and then if you stop, you go, I am the only one suffering here. Sleepless nights, can't stop thinking about that person, how wrong they are, how they shouldn't have done that, and we're the ones
exactly
caught in it.
I know.
And we're in the suffering.
But I think we can feel like, in fact, Matt, our colleague, and I talk about this when we're in the room, if we go into the healthy ego place. So let's say, for example, someone has given us a piece of very critical feedback, and perhaps it's been poorly delivered to us as well. If we go into that sort of open and curious space, gosh, that's a pretty strong piece of feedback you've given me.
No one's ever called me an idiot.
No, gosh, no, I'd love to unpack that a bit. It can feel like you've kind of given in, you've given ground, you've given way. It can feel not powerful. Whereas if you go in for the attack,
that's right,
you feel like, I'm the strong person.
I'm gonna win.
Yeah. And yet, when you go in for the attack, you've been got.
Yeah,
and you're then
100%.
you're then either probably both suffering and in a weaker position, because they'll then come back at you. Whereas if you go into that open curious space, A, you can't be got, and B, you're not suffering. But it just sometimes doesn't feel like it's the better position, but it is.
And it's that shift. And absolutely, during the retreat, so many of the stories about the Buddha were not that he didn't set boundaries or demonstrate to people that the way they were behaving or the thing that they were thinking was not helpful for them. But it was all coming from a place of love. But it was coming from a place of love and strength. Yeah. And very clear and very boundaried, and not allowing yourself to be caught or pulled into someone else's space, but not meeting it with hatred or anger.
And one of my favourite places to witness this is when politicians are being interviewed on the radio, on the TV.
Yeah.
And when they go into the unhealthy ego, so they've been got, and they start kind of attacking the journalist. Yeah. You can really feel it, and you can almost feel the journalist kind of smiling, because journalists are very good at taking that kind of response. But the politician has been got, and even though they might feel powerful because they're really rebutting what the journalist is saying, they've been got. Yeah. And the politicians that stay in that open space of kind of yes and it's a really interesting point, and we should talk about this. And They are so charming and brilliant,
and they've got solid. The power. Yeah, it's the power, exactly. So maybe I'm going to hand to you because you love this model. Maybe talk through for us the ego grid and where people think about size and we think about health.
Yes. So I mean, the first thing I would say that we all have an ego. It's a very, very useful thing. It's what drives you. It's your sense of self, your self-understanding, self-esteem. It's important, and we all need one. The ego kind of grows up, if you like, inside of us in terms of our understanding of who we are from when we are tiny babies through to children and into adults. So we have this sort of sense and understanding of who we are in the world.
And if we're not that...
it can feel very terrifying. So, maybe I think I'm a really good, kind person. Yeah. And if somebody says something that suggests that I'm not, it can be really terrifying because inside, psychologically, my understanding of who I am is I'm a kind person, but the world out there is telling me that I'm not. Terrifying. I don't know who I am. Yeah. I don't know how. I don't know if the world will see me in a different way that I'm not used to, and that they might not like me. Yeah. So it can be really terrifying for a number of different reasons, which is why we are often so quick to defend and protect the ego, and why sometimes we can respond quite dramatically to things that may not seem that big to other people. So if you think about your ego as your sense of self, lots of people talk about the big and the small ego, which we talk about in our grid, in our model. This is our way of looking at it, is what I will first of all say. And in terms of the size of the ego, it's probably not the most interesting piece, but we like to think of the size of the ego as a small ego would be when you're in an ego state where you're quite happy to kind of take the back seat. You don't necessarily want to be highly visible in the limelight. You don't necessarily want to share your thoughts and opinions. A big ego state would be when you want to be visible. You want to be seen. I've got things I want to share. So you can think of it as kind of down and up stage, or in the spotlight, out of the spotlight. Not good, not bad. We cycle through those. I often say if you're on the London Underground of a morning in rush hour, you're probably in a small ego state. Don't want to be seen, don't want to talk to too many people.
Yeah. And it's going to serve you, actually.
Yeah, that's the size of your ego. Both useful. But the health of your ego is the more interesting piece. And you can think about this in terms of the robustness of the ego, the robustness of that understanding of who you are, or the fragility of who you understand yourself to be.
So, how affected you are by what
other people say, exactly. Yeah. So a robust ego, robust sense of self is sort of like a rod of steel running through you. That's your identity, your self-understanding, your self-esteem. I know who I am. It's not arrogance, but it's a clarity on who I am in the world. And also
that you're fallible. You're not perfect.
Yeah, you're not perfect. Yeah. A fragile ego state, and again, we cycle through these depending on where we find ourselves. A fragile ego state would be much more like either a kind of jelly, or it could be more like glass. So it's a sense of self that's just much more fragile. Yeah. And by that we mean that when the world is offering you some information about yourself that might be contrary to what you think, it can be absolutely devastating on the ego. It doesn't hold up.
Yeah, it only feels safe. I mean, jelly is a really good analogy because it's only safe when the jelly mold from the outside
is propping it up. Exactly. Yeah. So you're very vulnerable to what the world is telling you.
You're really you're really bright, you're really intelligent, or you're really funny.
That can really support the ego and make you feel good about yourself and make you feel, yes, I think I do know who I am. Yeah. But if then the world offers you a piece of feedback that doesn't sit with who you think you are very, very vulnerable then, and it's terrifying, and you are likely to have one of two reactions. So if we think about the big and the small ego, and the healthy and fragile ego, we end up with a nicer Boston matrix for a 4-square grid. And if we're in the unhealthy or fragile ego state, the two likely responses we've got are either to go into sort of victim, feeling crushed, feeling really hurt, feeling dejected, self-critical. We kind of go in and contract, or we'll go out and attack, defend, blame. We'll be very reactive.
Or defensive.
Yeah, we'll react to the world or the people around us or the comment that we've got. If we're in a healthy ego state, the two sort of boxes, the two responses we can have if we get, for example, criticism, are either we can just be quite sort of passive, very neutral, accept and acknowledge what the other person's opinion is, Or we might even step in with curiosity and actually want to engage in a healthy, robust conversation about what the opinion out there in the world is and what that might mean. What can I learn? I'm really curious about it.
Yeah.
So our response pattern will be dictated by our ego state.
And it's such a wonderful practice to work more into that healthy ego, that either we're happy to acknowledge that actually we agree to disagree, and that's absolutely fine. Yeah. And if the other person is still shouting their position, you're still solid. And I'm really, really hearing you. Yeah. I really hear how you feel on this. For me, it's different, and that's okay with me. And if it's not okay with the other person, that's their ego.
Yeah, and your solidity does not depend on convincing the other person that they are wrong.
Exactly. And what I love about this is that you can think about this in a really simple mathematical equation, that in a relationship, you are 50% responsible for your part in that relationship. When it comes to your ego response, you are 100%, not 99%, not 85%, because actually if they only did this, then it would be easier. You are 100% responsible for your ego response.
Yeah. I mean, that's really the only control we have, is our own response in the world.
And that's the thing, isn't it? What's so interesting about it is that we feel there's that, again...
They made me.
Yeah, and again, it's why the ego and assumptions are so sneaky, because the ego feels all powerful when it gets all angry. And of course, it's at its absolute weakest.
Yeah, you make me feel. You
make me feel. So that means you've got all the power and I haven't got any. I'm not even controlling.
And it's your fault that I'm behaving like this.
It's your fault I'm behaving like this. I mean, it's a classic. So if you hear these things, that person is not in a healthy ego state. They are not in a place of power. They're in a place of fragility, having to make it your fault.
Well, the other thing about curiosity, of course, which is why it's so brilliant in terms of getting the ego where it needs to be, it's sort of like the trigger emotion, isn't it, between negative emotions and positive emotions. It's difficult to be in a negative emotional state or a fearful state when you're in curiosity.
Absolutely. And there's been quite a lot of research on this, that the brain actually can't hold those two at the same time. And if you start to get curious and open, then your fear will reduce. So I love this idea that curiosity killed the cat, is a phrase that we have certainly in the UK. I don't know where that's from, but anyway, curiosity killed the cat. But the wonderful thing is, curiosity can also kill the ego.
Very good.
So,
quote Philippa Waller.
So a practice that you can do is, when you feel yourself triggered and you're caught in that irritation, anger, they're wrong, I'm right, or I'm not good enough, whatever it is, some of the things Penelope's described around that unhealthy ego state, you can ask yourself two questions. First of all, ask yourself a question. And a really good question to ask is, what's my ego afraid of?
Yeah.
And that's quite a big question to ask yourself. But if you sit with it long enough, it will come up. Funnily enough, I was asked this question about something else by someone yesterday, and I thought, I'm not quite sure. And they said, what else might be going on for you there? And I thought, I don't really know. And then today we were on a walk, and I went, oh yeah, that's what it is. So if sometimes if you just ask yourself the question, it might not come immediately, but it might just pop into your head, and you go, well, I think that's, I'm afraid of being humiliated, or I'm afraid of that somebody will shame me,
not being good enough, or not being liked.
Exactly.
Or,
and there are other ways to help yourself through that, to get support from people, and there are other ways to bolster yourself. Self-love is the answer to pretty much everything. But so the first question is, ask your ego, what are you scared of? And then the second question to ask is, what does it feel like to be the other person? Not what does it look like to be the other person, but what does it feel like to be the other person? And that's a really, before you even get into communication with somebody in that very kind of active, healthy state of curiosity of, oh goodness, that is very direct. You feel very strongly about what happened on this project. Why don't we take half an hour and sit down, and I'd love to hear more about. So before we've even got to that, you're asking the question, hang on a minute, I'm seeing a red-faced shouting person.
Yeah, how are they feeling?
But what might it be like? Yeah. Because actually that looks that must feel quite uncomfortable and distressing for them.
Yeah.
And that's a different answer to they're just annoying.
Yeah, and I'm going to prove that.
And I'm going to prove that, exactly. Yeah. So get curious, and do not beat yourself up if you don't get curious in the very moment where you've been triggered. We're all human. Sainthood is hard. It's never never too late to go back.
Yeah.
Even if it happened a week ago, say, I've really reflected on it. Can we sit? Let's sit down.
I'd love to have a conversation.
I'd love to have a conversation.
Well, the other thing as well is, of course, if you really don't feel like stepping in with curiosity, then you do also have the choice of not stepping into the fight. So exactly as we've said before, in terms of sort of acknowledging, accepting the difference of opinions, it's also a powerful position. And I'm not talking about ignoring and stonewalling. I'm talking about very graciously making a decision that you don't want to enter into a conversation. You are entitled to have that choice.
Well, and I think this is a very nice sneaky preview to the next podcast, because that's on intention and story.
Yeah.
And there's a really lovely link. I mean, these have such a good through line. Can I be curious about what's going on for you, doggy? Before I say, why is that dog barking?
I mean, it's really hot in here.
Yeah. I wonder if, let me ask, I wonder what those dogs are feeling. Hot.
They want to get out.
There's a really nice through line to these topics, because when we think about intention, and as you've just said, sometimes we might just want to acknowledge and be in that sort of smaller ego, healthy ego state of I really acknowledge that we're in different places, or I really hear what you're saying, let's leave it there. Or we might get really curious and have that really engaged conversation and find out more. But exactly as you say, sometimes you don't want to turn up to this party because wherever the other person is or the situation is, actually you're not going to get anywhere. And that's where intention can come in. And funnily enough, at another meditation sitting I was at, the guy running it was asked the question about how do you deal with difference and how do you deal with conflict. And he said, and I thought it was just really pertinent and really spoke to the 4D work. He said, I think there's often a way through. But a really quick check is if that person has positive, good intentions, you can probably find a way through.
Yeah.
But if they have bad intentions towards you, you may just have to walk away.
Yeah.
And I thought it was just a really good check that we don't always have to do the surgery on a conversation.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can go, I just think that for now, at least at the moment, this is not coming from a good place, and I'm just going to leave it and move away for now. And it might not be forever, but it is. You're absolutely right. It is perfectly valid. This is not about the right thing to do. Is to always go in and have that curious, because it takes two.
Yeah,
as the song goes. So that was assumptions and ego. They are total game changers if you start working on those, and they can be a bit pokey when you start, because they reveal a lot about it.
Well, and we've brought the ego work into a lot more of our programs now, because whether it's about impact, standing up on stage and presenting, your leadership, developing the team collaboration, whatever it might be.
There it is.
The ego is at play.
Listen, the ego's at play on a meditation mat on your own for 10 days. It doesn't give up. It's determined. So, the ego is always in play. So you've got to play right back.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the 4D Human Being podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Do take on board some of the insights, tools and tips, because every time that you try something new to get back to choice, you are making a vote for the you that you want to become. And I love that phrase, Pen.
I do too. And please do share this episode with somebody that you know would really benefit from the lessons and learnings we've been chatting about today.
And of course, if you're interested in more from 4D Human Being, do get in touch. We run workshops, trainings, online, in person, conference events and keynotes. We've got the 4D On Demand platform for your whole organisation. And we do have a free Essentials membership where anybody can sign up for absolutely free to access some of our insights, tools and tips. So do get in touch with us if you'd like to hear more. We cannot wait to hear from you and to carry on the conversation.